Thank you all for attending this conference, and without further ado, let's move on to our keynote speaker, Amanda. Amanda has produced over 60 short documentaries about mental health and has given over 150 speeches around the US. She serves on the Mental Health Advisory Panel at Google and has served over 10 years as the youngest board member for the National Alliance on Mental Illness, also known as NAMI, the largest grassroots mental health nonprofit in the US. I'm so grateful for her support and for her being one of the first people to believe in me, and not the end for this conference. Today, she'll be sharing her journey going through the mental health system in college and becoming an advocate. Introducing Amanda Lipp.
All right, really, I'm so honored to be here. And Avani, it was so nice to hear your story. Thank you for being vulnerable and brave and sharing it. It really allows me to be brave and vulnerable and to share my story with you all. So I'm just really honored to be here with you all, and thank you. I'm gonna share my screen now and share with you my story. Okay, and I'm just gonna thumbs up. Avani, you can see my screen okay? Okay, awesome. So I like to call my presentation and my story Outside the Crayon Box, Creativity and Recovery. And the reason I call it creativity and recovery is because those two words were a really big part of my wellness and really recovering from the mental health crises that I experienced throughout middle school, high school, and even to this day, having those moments and having those times where things are really tough. It's been a really wild, year and a half for a lot of us. And so I think now more than ever, it's really important to talk about mental health, talk about wellness, illness, and what that means for each of our different respective backgrounds and experiences. And that really, it's okay to not be okay, and we can be there for each other. And so mental health is something I've been really passionate about since I was about 18 years old. And so I'm really excited to share with you a little bit about my story and how I got to this point today. So this image was when I was 18 years old and I was a freshman in college, and I was in a full-blown state of psychosis and mania, and was essentially beginning that mental health breakdown that was really kind of like a boiling tea kettle, if you will, where I had all of these issues going on deep down that I never really had an outlet for. And so my freshman year of college, I didn't know anyone. I was new on campus, transitioned from high school, and was really lost and didn't really know who I was. And all of these symptoms and unmet needs and lack of really expressing myself led up to this moment here where I was in a complete full-blown mental health breakdown. Found this broken mirror somewhere, climbed up in this tree, and I'm not even sure who took this photo, to be honest, and how I got it, but I really appreciate this photo because it reminds me of when I was really at my lowest point and the beginning of a really hard year. And I think this picture resembles me trying to find myself and trying to look into who I thought I was. But really it was a broken mirror of myself and a broken image of myself, and trying to really piece myself together. And that's really what this picture represents. And that was about 10 years ago now. It's hard for me to describe what mania felt like and what psychosis felt like, but really it was how my reality felt different than anyone else's reality. I was hearing things and I was seeing things that only I could see and hear and no one else could. So I was in this alternative state of reality and was experiencing a lot of really grandiose thoughts about just life and everything. And I began to have behaviors that were really abnormal and not the safest as well. I gave away all of my money. I dropped out of college and I began to feel really, really depressed. I began to kind of come down from this mania and psychosis and begin to feel this deep, dark depression. And that was a really kind of unfamiliar feeling for me. And it it was really scary. And again, I was a freshman in college at this point, so I didn't have a lot of peers around me. I didn't have my network of family and siblings and support around me who knew Amanda, who maybe could recognize when I wasn't doing well or could recognize when I needed some support. You know, when your friends just can kind of read you and know who you are. Well, in a new environment, and any new environment, not just college, but any new place, it can be hard to really tell what's going on with someone else. And so I felt pretty lost and, trying to be strong, trying to be, have that freshman year experience of feeling like you really have it all together, but really I didn't have it all together. This is a picture of me in high school. If I just go back in time a little bit to what led up to this breakdown my freshman year of college, and this is my best friend from high school. And she was always that friend who could read my mind and knew what I was going through and was there for me no matter what during those dark times. And going off to college, not having this peer support and this friend support was, I think, the first big challenge. And I always struggled with depression and anxiety throughout middle school and high school. And I think the stigma of talking about it and feeling like a burden or feeling like, well, who wants to hear about my bad day, really kept me from expressing myself and being vulnerable. And we didn't have a lot of awareness back then in middle school and high school. We didn't have campus clubs that talked about mental health or suicide prevention or how to seek counseling or support and things like that. And so really, even though throughout high school, I looked like I had it all together and I kind of pretended like I had it all together in a lot of ways, I really didn't have it all together. And I was a pretty typical average high school student. I played on the soccer team. I went to the dances. I had a diverse group of friends. I came from a pretty good family and I really kind of had it, quote unquote, all. And I think for some reason I felt like I had to live up to this perception of having it all together. And if I didn't have it all together, then it would almost feel selfish or, well, people have it worse, and kind of that dipping into that place of comparing myself. But what happens when we compare ourselves is we minimize our own experience and we jeopardize our own opportunity for finding help and being vulnerable, and that we all are allowed to feel not okay. And that's the first step to really feeling well. And I didn't realize that. And so I was almost trying to be a hero to myself or a hero for other people in a way by being strong, staying strong, and just taking it out on the soccer field. And it ended up not being sustainable, honestly. And that's what led to that freshman year breakdown. And so I learned a lot from this experience, and really holding it in, I ended up really paying the price later on mentally. And I show this picture as kind of a mirror to that high school picture, because this is me when I was about 5 or 6 years old with my mom. And I think that there was really this inner child in Amanda throughout middle school and high school that was struggling with her sexual gender identity. And now I'm a gay woman and I have come out already, and that's who I am, and I'm proud to say that. But I did not come out in middle school and high school. And I think that really took a toll on me, and I didn't feel safe or comfortable on campus or in my community, or really with myself, honestly, coming out. But I think I wanted to. And I think that mental health and our identity, whether that's our sexual gender identity or racial, ethnic, whatever background and whatever we represent and who we are, I think that the flip side of that is mental health. I think the two go hand in hand, identity and mental health. And when I came out finally, about halfway through college, it was this big release, and finally not being afraid to say who I am, just like how I was learning slowly how to not be afraid of talking about when I was not feeling well with my mental health. And so I share this photo because it's really, I think, that inner child in me that was struggling, that didn't know how to express herself. Now, flashing back forward, I mentioned I had this psychiatric hospitalization from that freshman year breakdown when I was in that tree and I was experiencing psychosis and mania and this really rock bottom. And after I went through that breakdown, I was admitted to a psychiatric hospital for 3 months. And I cycled between the mental health system for what would have been the second half of my freshman year of college. And when I was finally discharged, this was actually the day I was discharged. It's in the Sacramento Rose Garden. That's where I'm based, in Sacramento, California. And my mom is here and she's walking me through the Rose Garden. And this picture is so meaningful to me because it represents family and just love, and how if we're really, if we can go the extra mile for, or the extra step, honestly, for ourselves and for our friends and our family, it makes all the difference in the world. And I truly believe it's the little things that can change the world. And my mom was a huge part of my recovery, and that unconditional support and being there for me in the hardest of times, and really allowing me to see that it's okay to not be okay, and that she wants to hear the bad days and the good days, and that she's proud of me no matter what. And so how can we be there for our friends and our family, and even just putting an arm around their shoulder, or really leaning in and asking, how are you? And really pausing there and truly asking and truly meaning it, and asking those follow-up questions and just actively listening. I think that those moments are when we truly earn that trust with ourselves and with others, that we really want to know how you're doing. And that's what I'm still learning to this day, honestly, is how to accept that help, how to embrace that help, and that I'm worthy of that help. We're all worthy of really being listened to, and when we're going through those hard times. And this is my whole family. My brother, he was a police officer a few years ago, and my sister, my mom, my dad, and I really, again, show this because family, and I think our friend network, and whoever is our support network, I think is so important, and how we can be there for each other. Now, these are my crayon drawings, and as my presentation title alluded to, creativity and recovery. And so when I was in the psychiatric hospital, I was given a box of crayons because that was a safe and cheap medium for the hospital to give me to use. And I thought at first, a box of crayons, like, come on, like, what am I, like 5 years old? And I kind of like, at first felt like, no, like, I don't want to draw with crayons. But it's kind of like that cliche of, right, when you're given lemons, you make lemonade. And so I took this box of crayons, this kind of broken box of crayons, and I thought, well, what can I do with this, and how can I express myself? And I can only go up from rock bottom. And so I began to layer and etch with these crayons, and it became a pathway for recovery. And these crayon drawings represent what I could not speak of, and what I felt ashamed of, and various traumas that I had been through. And it really gave me a voice. It gave me a visual voice. And I would use these crayon drawings with my treatment team, with my family, as really a form of art therapy, as a way to, as a medium and a bridge for my thoughts. And it gave me purpose. It made me feel like there can be light in the darkness, and that, hey, like, I can draw with crayons. If I can draw with crayons and scratch them with my fingernails and layer with them, then, like, what else can I do? And it gave me a sense of purpose again, because I was feeling very helpless and, quite honestly, very ashamed. I was a college dropout. I went through this complete mental health breakdown, and it was really, I was embarrassed. I would tell my friends that I had an internship at a psychiatric hospital because I was studying to be a psychologist. I mean, I really couldn't even, like, speak the truth about what I had been through. And it took me a while to get to that point where I could proudly share that I went through something hard and I came out the other end. And really what I call this crayon medium is this expression to wellness journey. And it began with access. It began with a nurse noticing that I wasn't doing well, and really observing that and being thoughtful. And she walked up to me and gave me a box of crayons. And I think for all of us, like, how can we think about what that first step is? And for me, it was really being handed a box of crayons and then using them. And then, yeah, the expression, the drawings, and the layering, and the etching, and the catharsis, the therapeutic benefits from that art therapy that then led to conversations. It led to opening up. It led to feeling proud. It led to confidence, purpose. And all of that was what enabled me to move on to these different steps. Translation. I would look at the beginning of a crayon drawing that was just a couple layers, or just the beginning, and then the very end being this beautiful, what I thought was a masterpiece. And it allowed me to think about, well, how do I translate trauma or bad days into good days? And then finally, opportunity. So then how do I take these crayon drawings and what do I do next? And that's when I began to think about sharing my story and volunteering. So after I was discharged from the hospital, I felt really lost and I didn't know what to do. I was trying to take classes to get back into college and was working a part-time job at a grocery store and really just trying to learn who Amanda was again. And I was really lost. And so I thought, well, I'm going to start volunteering for local mental health nonprofits, the first one being NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. So I found my local NAMI affiliate and they were so wonderful. And they were really the first door that opened for me. And from there, I began sharing my story and speaking at high schools, colleges, and auctioning my crayon drawings. And this money then led to raising awareness and raising funds for youth suicide prevention programs. And so this picture is at a conference where I shared my story. And I got to tell you, I was so scared and I was so nervous to share my story at this conference. I know I don't look like it in this photo, but I was absolutely terrified. In fact, I think it was probably one of my worst presentations I gave because I was trying to memorize it and I wasn't being myself. And so that was another lesson I learned that day, that just be yourself, right? And just trust yourself and just go out there and do it. And so that was a really big lesson that day, but I was really happy the way it ended because this drawing made $700. It was auctioned for $700 and went to a suicide prevention program. And so it just proved to me that even when I'm scared, I can go out and I can try, and that these seemingly silly crayon drawings can actually make a big difference. Now, I wanted to share a tool with you that has helped me and continues to help me to this day. And I call it mapping my journey. And it's kind of a way of journaling my mental health moments. So on the left there, you see the y-axis, the highs and the lows, and that's kind of like my mood continuum. And then on the x-axis here on the bottom, high school, middle school, college, all these different contexts were really kind of a way that I could begin to contextualize my mental health journey. And I thought, how do I track how I'm feeling and how do I kind of document these moods and these highs and these lows, and how are they starting and how are they ending? And what's that baseline? Like, when am I actually feeling okay? And I can function in society and I can go and hang out with my friends and I can feel maybe not happy, but content, right? And setting that expectation of like not having to feel amazing, but just, hey, like I'm doing all right and that's okay. And then what I would do is I would begin to chart all these different points across this baseline and begin to think about where those highs and those lows were and those things that may have triggered those highs and those lows. So the red dots represent kind of the tough times, and even the tough times being those highs, because then it would kind of crash after that maybe. And one of these big red dots, actually, the one right above high school here, represents when I blew out my knee. I blew out my ACL, which is the biggest ligament in your knee. And I was taken out of middle school. This is 8th grade. I was taken out of sports for a year. And soccer was a huge part of my identity and a huge part of how I got it out. You know, when I express myself, I'm a really active person. And so the biggest mental health outlet for me is, besides art, is actually physical activity, going on runs and playing team sports. And so you can imagine being told by the doctor, you can't play soccer for a year, was absolutely devastating. And I had to learn how to rehabilitate not only my knee, but my mind. And my parents taught me basically when this happened, like, Amanda, I know you can't play soccer for a year, but what else can you do? There are so many other things you can do. Don't put all your eggs in one basket. Let's start to diversify. Let's think about other things you can do because you have so many other talents. And that was really motivating and inspiring for me to think a little bit outside the box about who I am and what else I can do. And I began to then pair these hard times with green dots. And the green dots represented strength and how, yeah, this is a really hard time and a really hard day, but how can I practice gratitude, positivity, and thinking about what I can learn from this really, really tough time? And that began to give me confidence and hope that it's going to be okay and we can keep moving forward. And this is another little tool that I like to have fun with. I'm a 90s kid, so I think all of you are old enough to maybe identify with Mad Libs. So my parents would always give my siblings and I Mad Libs on long car rides as a way to kind of keep us quiet in the back seat on these long car rides. And so anyone who knows Mad Libs, I think, knows that these are usually nice, fun kind of travel games. But to me, Mad Libs is a metaphor for mental health. I call it mental health mad libbing. And I created kind of my own concept for mental health mad libbing in terms of really taking ownership of your narrative, and that your narrative might change. Symptoms might change, feelings might change, our identities might change, and that's okay. And mental health mad libbing for me gave me power that, hey, I can insert and I can choose and I can negotiate kind of like what these feelings are with myself, with my family, with my care team, with whomever it might be who's in your court. And I created my own mental health mad libbing. So I created literally a word bank, and it was just words that kind of that meant something to me. So psychological, body, environment, behavior, mood, cognitive, and put a few words in these different boxes. And then I created a little bit of a template, just like the Mad Libs. And it gave me this sort of, it kind of gamified mental health for me, in that I can just pick from this word bank sort of like how I'm feeling and begin to learn what these different words mean, and Google them and learn about them and bring them into my therapy sessions or talk about them with my siblings and say, hey, what's your mental health word bank? Like, how do you identify with your mood and your behavior, and what words do you use in your culture? And so it gave me this power and this ownership around how, we can craft our narrative. Now, this is an image that depicts another little tool that I thought was really helpful that my mom did with me when I was discharged from the hospital. And it's a little diary that we both shared. And she would fill it out and then I would fill it out. And on the left side, we would list the 3 things in the day that were really hard and really challenging. And then on the right side, 3 things that we were grateful for and that went really well. And so she would fill this out and she would hide it in my room or under my pillow like the tooth fairy, and I would read it and feel like, oh wow, like my mom had a hard day and had a few things happen, but wow, look at these other few things that happened that were actually pretty cool. And it just allowed again for that pairing of like, things can be hard, but then also how do we think about things that might be a window for feeling okay and feeling proud of ourselves. And so then I would fill it out and then I'd go hide it in her room, and it became a way to kind of build our relationship and for us to almost like in our own private way express through writing how we were feeling. My mom and I didn't have a great relationship during this time. And so this was our way of trying to reconnect and trying to, in our own words and in our own time and in our own private space, fill out how we were feeling and then hide it in each other's rooms. And it kind of became a little mother-daughter bonding game. And some days we wouldn't do it. Some days I wouldn't feel like connecting and writing anything down, and that's okay. But I'm really glad that she began this activity because it really brought us a little bit closer. And then I wanted to share these images because a big part of how I got well was volunteering and beginning to serve on various mental health boards and get involved. And I'm so moved and inspired by Avani starting this nonprofit because it's just incredible. And I think that's a huge thing that for me at least, and it helped me get well, was getting involved and volunteering. And this top picture here on the left was when I began volunteering for the NAMI California walk, and would simply set up I went to community college when I was going back to school again. And I just set up a table and put out NAMI brochures and lollipops, because who doesn't love a lollipop? I mean, I definitely got more traffic with the candy, but again, it was kind of pairing like tough conversations with like, something kind of fun and sweet. And so, but really volunteering and getting involved was huge for me. And on the bottom right picture, this was when I began serving on the NAMI California board. I think I was like 20 years old in this photo. And as you can see, I'm the youngest person by a pretty large margin in this photo. And I was so scared. I was so intimidated to be, I didn't know what I was doing. Okay. Like, I still don't know what I'm doing. We're all figuring it out. Right. But, I think the lesson here for me is don't be afraid to dive in. Your voice matters. And we need to hear more youth voice and mental health. It's nothing about us without us, right? And if we're going to be talking about mental health and youth mental health, we got to be at the table, and we got to be talking and strategizing with everyone, regardless of age, regardless of background. We have to have a diverse representation. And so I'm really proud of this photo because I was so scared. And again, you probably don't notice that I'm scared. I look like I have it all together, but I was super scared. But still, use that and channel it and try to just join these different efforts that you're passionate about, because at least for me, that became a really big part of my own wellness and also building a career in mental health. I went back to college. I transferred from community college into UC Davis, and I became really passionate about filmmaking, documentary filmmaking, and storytelling. And I thought, I've worked really hard to find my story and with the public speaking and the volunteering, and finally feeling proud of my story and not ashamed. And don't get me wrong, there are days when I still have those low moments and feel ashamed or feel stigma. So that'll always be, I think, a lifelong thing for me. And I think that's healthy and normal, because that gives me strength and it gives me perspective. But here is when I began really getting passionate about other people's stories and how can I be a peer and how can I help use my empathy to inspire others and have them maybe share their story with me on camera. And so I began making documentary films. This was actually a study abroad program that I entered in and made my first documentary about global mental health, and just interviewed people on the streets and just kind of winged it, honestly. I bought a really cheap camera and learned how to use it on the airplane going over to Ireland, and just kind of winged it, honestly. And that was really fun for me, and just interviewing people on the streets and emailing people at nonprofits and asking, hey, would you like to sit down with me for an hour and talk about mental health? And so the lesson here for me was to get creative and to jump in, even if you don't know what you're doing, and just start. And this was probably one of the best experiences of my life. And to that day, I've made short films about youth mental health and really thinking about elevating youth mental health and our diverse identities and backgrounds. And really, these are some screenshots of different young people who I've interviewed and who've shared their stories or have shared their experiences with other young people. And I think that's a really big part of mental health, is paying it forward and how we can use our own experiences to empower other people and think about how we can be innovative and how we can really build this mental health movement together, one story at a time. Now, I want to show you a short film. It's 1 minute long, and you can check out the other films I've made on my website. They're all free and available to watch, and you can share them. And this is Amber, and she's a personal hero of mine. In this photo, she was 19 years old. I think now she's about 22 years old, and she has schizophrenia, and she identifies with schizophrenia, and she's publicly open with that information. And this is me and her in the New York subway, and I was working on a project with Columbia Psychiatry, making a short documentary series about their youth psychosis treatment program. And Amber was one of the stars of our film. She so bravely shared her story with me, and I made a short film about 7 minutes long about Amber talking about hearing voices and her dreams to become a writer and write a book and travel the world and all these things. And she was so inspiring. And I love that. I don't know even who got this shot, but I somehow got this photo. And it really represents, I think, that peer-to-peer production aspect, and how we can really share our stories with each other in hopes of then maybe another youth in a different part of the world or next door to us will watch Amber's story and feel inspired and not so alone, because maybe they're also hearing voices or going through something where they're not feeling super well. And so I want to show you a 1 minute clip of Amber's film, and it might be a little choppy through Zoom. I hope not, but again, you can check them out on my website if you want to watch any of them. And so without further ado, here's Amber's short film.
At 19, I was diagnosed with schizophrenia. So just imagine having commentary on your every move, every thought, every action that you could possibly think of, and just have that commentary turn negative. I think that's the best way to explain the voice inside my head. Letting that come out of my head and be out in the open, that was the way that I knew that I was going to get better.
So that's Amber, again, a personal hero of mine. So virtual round of applause for Amber for being so vulnerable and oopsies, being so vulnerable and so brave. And I truly look up to Amber and the other youth that I have made films about, because it wasn't just making these films to try to reach other youth and promote these psychosis programs, but also it brought me wellness too. And it was really just such a wonderful experience. And that peer-to-peer, again, that how do we relate with one another and have that connection and make these stories and share stories. And I think everyone has their own time and place and way in which we do share our story. And so I leave you with this question: what's in your crayon box? And the crayon box is just a metaphor, so fill in the blank. What's in your fill in the blank? And really it's to encourage us to think about our toolbox. What are those mediums that you have that help you when things are hard and when things are also going well? And who's in your court? Who has your back? And really, how can we help them? How can they help us? And something that I'm really working on this year, kind of my New Year's revelation, if you will, is to accept help, and to, when people say, how are you, to really think about it and to really answer how I'm comfortable, and maybe say I'm not okay, or whatever it is that I'm feeling, and to really think. So what's in your crayon box? And thank you so much for hearing my story, for being here at this conference today. I really am so honored to be with you all, and really admire all of your bravery and courage being here, learning about mental health. And I know I have a lot to learn as well. So without further ado, thank you so much. And thank you, Avani and Not the End nonprofit, for having me today. And I think we have time for like a few minutes for questions. I'm gonna turn it back to you, Avani.
Yeah, we definitely have some time. If anyone has any questions for Amanda, we have until 10 a.m., a few more minutes. If anyone wants to ask her anything, feel free to. Now's the time. I will enable participant unmuting.
Awesome.